Welcome to the big SEC regular season, SEC tournament, NCAA seeding, MVP episode. We'll talk about the game too. It's going to be a big time episode. At the end, we also have. Well, we'll just go over the list here. We've got MVP discussion. We've been doing our MVP after every game. I finally did the math on how many MVPs we have, and we're going to give you the results on who's the overall MVP for this team for the regular season. Then we're going to talk about NCAA seeding. That's like the hot thing everybody's talking about. What seed do we get? Who are we playing? What's our path look like? What does everybody else's path look like? Then we'll get into the SEC tournament from a higher level. Who won? What the games look like? The crazy zany stuff. What we ended up with. Then we'll get into the game. I know we do postseason stuff usually, like post game kind of things, but we figured we'd start with the hotter stuff and get to the game because that'll kind of might drag us down a little bit compared to some of the other stuff. Then we'll get into some of the coaching news, a lot of coaching news in the SEC. It's just interesting to see the implication. And we'll finish it up and stick around. And if you're interested in this too, we're going to put it on at the end. Horace Spencer's come on the show, the legend. So he's come on the show, and we did a great interview with him earlier today around noon. So he didn't know the seeding and the SEC tournament results and stuff at that point. So, just have that in mind, and we'll put the little timestamp on there about when to check that out. So welcome, Matt. Thoughts?
It's an extravaganza. I think this or the Thursday, the first full day of the tournament, is the best day of the sports calendar for me personally. Really excited. Got to get pumped when I saw Auburn come up on the bracket. I still take that for granted, or I don't take that for granted after the 15-year drought and then COVID, and then last year, obviously not getting to be in. So really excited. And, Friday was rough, and we'll get into why it was rough. But I think everything that happened today is about as good as we could have asked for.
Well, let's not, I know people are waiting with bated breath to find out who the MVP. I'm sure every player it's like Selection Sunday, basically. I'm sure, or the high, or like some other trophy people get for different sports. The MVP. And let's go from bottom to top, like the least amount of MVPs to the number one. So tied for they got MVPs, and some players didn't get MVPs. So tied for last. Oh, I made a spelling error in here. So actually, there's some change even in my own head. I had to do a little pivot over here. So tied for having won, Zep Jasper and Devin Cambridge. Surprised, I forgot Devin Cambridge had gotten one way back in at a conference play, I believe. So both of them are fan favorites, and we like on the podcast to talk about them, like their little niche in the sport. So I think both of them kind of had those games where they finally did something we thought they could, and we had to reward them with an MVP. And Zeps, I think Cambridge was a dual MVP. As much as we tried to avoid it, we ended up doing several. And Zeps was actually a solo. So if you're putting them in order, I might put Zep above for having the solo. Next up on the list, 4 MVPs, KD. He started out super strong and had several MVPs at the start of the season. And he had the Missouri MVP. He had an OT, an overtime MVP. I didn't count that one. I think he deserved it from a recognition standpoint for my tallies at the end of the year. I didn't want to count it. Next up on the list, it'll be the third position guy, Wendell Green with 7. He's he had a great streak there. I was going down the list, and when I was putting these names together, I kind of do it like one by one. It's like, dang, Wendell might win this thing. He's got a lot. But man, down the stretch, as we all know, it's kind of fallen off a little bit. So he had 7. So don't forget when we're upset later about some stuff, or we're talking about, man, he had 7 MVPs this season. That's third on the team. He's the third most important player on the team, I guess you could say. Next, second place, here's the big 2 dogs. We kind of knew it was coming down to the big 2 dogs. Wendell and KD kind of gave him a little fight, but we knew before the season, we knew in the season, these 2 guys were going to be the guys. Drum roll for second place, so you'll know. Actually, I'm just going to announce first place because you'll know who first place is at the end of it. First place for the Jungle MVP for 2021, 2022, Walker Kessler with 10 MVPs. Jabari comes in with 8 MVPs. It was a close one. If things had gone different in the SEC tournament, Jabari's still got a chance. I hope we go late. Jabari's on right now. A lot of his MVPs have come on late. So Jabari, listen up. You're 2 away from tying Walker. We go Elite Eight, and Jabari could be ahead. So I know, there's things to play for in the NCAA, but we all know the real thing to play for is the Jungle MVP.
Absolutely. No, thanks for totaling those up. I think that gives you a good idea for the season. Walker, if you look at advanced metrics, I forget which one it is. Walker had 10 or 12 straight games where he was our best player, taking into account both ends of the floor. Statistically, not from a bias, just looking at the game like we do. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, obviously Jabari is the best NBA prospect. He's been our best player, I think, as a scorer and as a true freshman. Obviously what he's done has been amazing, but where would this team be without the emergence of Kessler on both ends, that we just didn't see coming at all? I think that may be why he, let's be honest, we just had way higher expectations for Jabari than Walker, and Walker really did a great job of soaring our expectations through the roof.
Yeah, Walker Kessler 2 triple doubles, Jabari Smith 0 triple doubles. So it's that. Don't forget, as much as Jabari is the great scorer and clearly the more talented player from an NBA prospect standpoint, a scoring standpoint, like Walker does a lot of things from all different angles. That's why he ultimately ended up with winning the MVP award for the regular season. We'll keep track with it. I'm hoping we can have a situation where we have to keep doing the math. We hope we're there. Some interesting thing. I look at this list. I was about to make this point. Dang, Cambridge ruined my point I was about to make. That we have MVPs from the point guard, we have MVPs from the 2 position, the 4 position, the 5 position. Cambridge ruined it by having the 1 MVP in the 3 position. But ultimately, like if you told me this list that we were going to do MVP for every game, and I was going to look at this at the end, I'd go, oh no, Alan Flanagan must have gotten hurt again. He must have decided not to play this season. He must have retore his Achilles or something. Like no Alan Flanagan on this list, preseason first team all SEC. Not on the list. So that, that kind of shows that gaping hole in our game that we kind of expected. And that, people brought it up a little bit that man, a lot of people expected a big thing when he came back and we've been in this lull and we kind of expected maybe this was the time for that to step up. And it's kind of been the opposite. So that's the MVP stuff. Matt, any other thoughts on the MVP race?
That's a good recap. We needed to give the people what they needed going into the postseason.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could talk about a little NCAA seeding here. We, it was interesting coming into the SEC tournament. The theory was that Gonzaga was locked in. Arizona was pretty much locked in unless they lost, in the first round of their kind of thing. Then it was who's my third one that's kind of locked in? Kansas, I guess. It was Kansas and Baylor, Kentucky and Auburn were kind of the 4 that were battling for those other 2. There's a lot of people out there that picked Kansas and Baylor to both have the other 1 seed, surprisingly, but a lot of people were saying whoever wins of Auburn and Kentucky, if they win the SEC tournament and go through Arkansas or Tennessee or vice beating each other, they're going to get that 1 seed. It ended up both Kentucky and Auburn went down in the SEC tournament. So that seed got taken away kind of. Oh, Duke's the other one I'm thinking of. They had a chance at a 1 seed. They went down early in their tournament. Baylor went down early in their tournament. I think Kansas ended up winning there. So then we had 3 locked in. We had Gonzaga, Arizona, and Kansas all won their tournaments and we're already kind of in that discussion. So then we have that fight for that last spot between Baylor that lost early, a Kentucky that lost early, and Auburn that lost early, Duke that lost early. Duke was pretty much knocked out. Then there was a lot of talk about Tennessee all of a sudden because they got hot late. And I'm glad ultimately the committee kind of looked at a bigger picture than ESPN. Man, ESPN was just pushing that narrative as hard as they could that Tennessee deserved a number 1 spot or whatever. They ultimately got 3 and they were shocked. I think maybe they could have done. I think Tennessee would be fine as a 2. I wouldn't have complained as them as a 2, but I think the committee looked at a bigger picture and they ultimately ended up picking Baylor, who I feel like Baylor has more losses than us, right? They have 6 losses to our 5. That's irritating to me. I feel like some of that's the reputation of the Big 12 right now. And I would have to look at Baylor's schedule altogether. Matt would argue it's metrics, which screw metrics. I'm tired of metrics. Metrics have had us bad all year long. So it's interesting. Baylor ended up with the other seed. So then 2 seeds ended up being Auburn ended up being a 2 seed, Kentucky ended up being a 2 seed. Who else ended up being 2 seeds?
Kentucky, Villanova, Auburn, Duke.
Duke.
Yeah.
What was our? Do you know what our overall 2 seed was? Was it the highest one or the second highest one? Or,
so
you didn't beat us out for the highest 2 seed. Did they? I'll be pissed about that too.
So we should, if they did it according to proper principles, we would be the second 2 seed.
Behind 2, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, it doesn't really matter, but it's disrespectful after we beat them. I know it was at home, but.
Well, here's the thing. So if you had wanted to be the second 2 seed, or the top 2 seed, sorry, you would have been with Purdue, like you didn't want.
Oh, I didn't want that. Yeah.
With Baylor, North Carolina, UCLA, that Murray State in the second round potentially. I love it. We can talk about our matchup now, or at least say the name now.
We are playing as a number 2 seed in Greenville at noon Eastern against Jacksonville State, of the Jacksonville State that's from the state of Alabama. You can't tell me these bracket people didn't do this on purpose. Put us with the 15 seed that's from Alabama. They put Kentucky on the other side with Murray State, who I feel like is another reason they did that. Like, I'm sure like they're not like trying to find these, but when it gets close and they have like a 15 seed they can pick from against us, they're like, oh, that's a good matchup. Like they want the TV ratings to be good. They want the storyline. That's going to be a storyline. So,
well, and you're right. And the interesting thing with Jacksonville State, as a lot of people know, is they didn't win their conference tournament. The newbie in their conference won, and there's some dumb NCAA rule where they're not eligible. They had a worse regular season than Jacksonville State did. And then Jacksonville State gets to go, even though they didn't win their conference tournament.
What's
however,
the concept? What is the concept behind that?
Don't ask me to defend NCAA.
I know. There's got to be a concept. I just like can't even like think in my mind like why. Like if they can jump up and do it, like good for them.
I don't know, but I love the draw, and here's why. We've talked a little bit on the podcast about the location. Auburn as a fan base is kind of new to this, right? So this is the first time. I would have to go back and look at 99 where we ended up, but I mean, there was only one location in this entire first and second round that was anywhere close to Auburn, and it was Greenville.
It is still not even really that close. Like no Atlanta, no Florida, no Nashville, nothing in Alabama.
No.
I think it's in Florida already. No Mississippi, none of that deep South region. Right. The closest is freaking Greenville and like Dallas. So it just sucks. Like how can you not have no New York City either? I'm in New York City. It's just weird that you can't have a tournament with this many sites and not have a Atlanta, not have a Nashville, not like do right vice versa, right? Do 1 year in Nashville, 1 year in Atlanta, 1 year in Orlando. Like it's weird.
It's weird. The only reason I can maybe see it is that the Final Four is down south. Maybe that plays into it a little bit. But the teams that lucked out were Duke. They're in Greenville as well, which I just looked at ticket prices. They're astronomical because Duke and Michigan State are both in Greenville as well.
So they have eight teams in Greenville.
Every site has 8 teams there. So
don't then put that one in a different location. Like, what is the point? I guess
they're not. What do you mean?
Make sure the sites make enough money, I guess. Like they have to have a certain amount of games, make enough money. Surely not. Surely it wouldn't be that bad.
That's just how it goes. That's how it's been forever. So that's great for us. That's a great first. And we play Jacksonville State, which is a good draw for us, I think. USC and Miami are going to play opposite of us. We'll play the winner of that, hopefully, if Auburn can advance. Miami has been okay. They're decent. The ACC was way down. I think USC might be a little undervalued as a 7 seed. That could be a little tricky, but I love that we avoided Purdue. I love that we avoided Texas Tech. I love that we avoided Tennessee. Wisconsin.
The concept wise, like I'm avoiding in my head is avoiding other big men because we've kind of seen it. Like Walker's amazing, but he's neutralized a bit with other big men, and like he dominates when it's a game where he's the kind of like freak athlete out there. But when he has to go against a big man, he gets in a little foul trouble. He doesn't like gets blocked out on like trying to get those blocks and stuff. So yeah, I heard USC's got some tall guys. So if we're like cheering somebody in that one, I think we want to play Miami. And Miami, I think, beat Duke at home in Durham. So I think that they're not a bad team. They've upset some people. So
they're not bad. And look,
anybody play is going to be bad. So
yeah, anytime you get to the round of 32, I mean, you're playing somebody decent. I just think if you look at it, Wisconsin's the 3 seed in our side that we could potentially play in a Sweet 16. I love that matchup for us. As it's always going to be tough in the Sweet 16 unless upsets happen. You also have LSU and Iowa State that are going to pound on each other. And I don't think LSU is going to make it there. But if we did, I don't hate that matchup for us either. And then you look at the top.
Will Wadeless LSU.
Yeah. I wouldn't
mind playing a Will Wadeless LSU. I think that would be all right. I think we match up pretty good with them. So
yeah, I mean, I'd still rather avoid.
But by the time we'd have to play them, they would have gotten a little hot to win these couple games. So but Wisconsin's been a big team all year. I'm pretty sure they have a great player, like one of the greatest players in college basketball on their team right now, right?
Do they?
Was it Davies, right?
Oh, yeah, he's been there a long time. He's a good guard.
But I heard this year he's like a top 5 guy, right? Like he was in all the award watch lists this year. He's like been blowing people up. I think that's the reason they're a 3 seed this year.
Maybe I'm sleeping on him a little bit.
I heard it's a good matchup though, that they don't have a guy that's going to be able to match up with Jabari. No one really can match up with Jabari, but like just from hearing some of the pundits today, they were like, who on this team could even like get in Jabari's face? So that could be good.
Well, and I just think about it in terms of we haven't done it consistently, but playing our type of game, our type of game is different. I think even if you watched some of the SEC tournament this week with us out, it's just we play differently. And I think when you get in these tournament situations, that can really be an advantage with our pressure on defense, our wanting to turn it up and have our depth and run. And I just, if you look at the other half, the only other point I was going to make, Kansas is playing really well. They're the 1 seed, but look at who they're going to have to go through. They're going to have to go through like Iowa's over there, who just won the Big Ten tournament. I think they're underseeded as a 5 seed. Providence is over there, was the best team in the Big East. They're a 4. They're all going to have to play each other and beat each other up. Whoever.
Even South Dakota State's dangerous. They haven't lost a game in like months. They went undefeated in their conference and have been really hot.
And Kansas,
that's awful for Providence, honestly. Providence had a really good year where they've had some really cool close wins and like had a whole thing. And now they have to go against like one of those teams that you just don't want to have to play.
Yeah. And then your reward for Providence. I laughed when I saw Providence come up. If you somehow, if you avoid the 4-13 upset there, you probably play Iowa, who just took it to the rest of the Big Ten and, has some really experienced guards up there. So I'm glad that the strength of this section tends to be at the top, that Auburn wouldn't have to touch until, the Elite 8 potentially. So.
And Iowa won the Big Ten tournament, right?
Yep.
Yeah, me and Matt were talking a little earlier today. That's interesting that like, Jacksonville, we got really lucky with Jacksonville State here. I'm sure there's the other 15 seeds are St. Peter's, the Peacocks playing Kentucky. So hopefully they'll lose to another Peacock team. Almost wore my Peacock shirt today. And then Cal State Fullerton, you got it on it. Yeah, he's got it. That's the Peacock from the student section, from the famous Tumors Corner video with Dylan Cardwell. So we got Cal State Fullerton over there too as a 15 seed, and Delaware. I'm sure those other 3 won their tournament. I'm sure those are not at larges or whatever.
Right.
So they're all coming off of a win streak of confidence. Now they're all like much less athletic teams, but so is Jacksonville State. So we got the 115 seed that didn't win their tournament is coming off of a loss because of that weird situation. So good for us. The one bad thing about it is that extra like in-state motivation kind of thing. All these players on that team, I'm sure didn't get picked by Auburn and would have loved to come play for Auburn or whatever. So that's a thing. I'm sure there'll be some pundits or different people from outside the state that are cheering against us that are like, oh, Jacksonville State fans must be going crazy, or I bet people are going nuts in Jacksonville State, blah, blah. Newsflash, there are 0 Jacksonville State fans. That is not a real thing. They don't exist. They're all Alabama fans or Auburn fans, and probably 90% Alabama fans that happen to go to Jacksonville State. There's no real Jacksonville State fan in the state of the world.
Well, you're right. So we play them first. I already said USC. The cool thing, the second weekend is going to be in Chicago. Again, the options were Philly, Chicago, San Antonio, or San Francisco. So if you're looking for, you would have loved Philly. For people in the Northeast, would have been great. Chicago is I will be tempted to maybe get there. You'd be looking at a Kansas, Iowa. That would be a lot of fans. But if Kansas and Iowa don't make it to the Sweet 16, that could end up being, and Wisconsin, I guess.
Big Ten, I love that area.
But so Greenville, Chicago, New Orleans is the destinations for us if we're going to keep winning.
No, I don't. I guess you play in a basketball arena, I'm sure, in the Sweet 16 in Chicago. So the tickets might be
United Center, Bulls,
but at least we played the Final Four in Minneapolis, and I went, and that city's just not big enough for that kind of event with 4 different fan bases coming in. Like it was so hard to find a place to stay. I ended up staying in a weird Airbnb, but with Chicago, the flights and the hotel rooms really shouldn't be too bad, I assume. So that's good. One less thing, but it does suck. I really wanted Philly so I could take a train down and not flew down already for that South Carolina game. But I'll be looking at how cheap the flights are in the hotel rooms and everything. And if we can pull it off, we'll do a live from Chicago at the Bean podcast or something.
Well, and I've already made it clear. I'll throw it out there here. I'm not trying to jinx the team, but I've said since Minneapolis, I was going to drive to the title game. Auburn makes that the end of that game so heartbreaking. I don't want to relive it, but I was like, I had already made plans. I was driving from Nashville to Minneapolis on Sunday, go to the national championship on Monday, and then it all gets taken away. So I hate that I didn't get to experience that like you did. So if we get to New Orleans, I'm there. I've already, it's drivable for me. I'm going to be there. So hopefully at one game before that. And like we know, it's so hard to make a Final Four. You know, we could spend this podcast talking about Duke and Kentucky, these amazing basketball schools that, you know, it's been a while. It's been a while since they've made a Final Four. It's hard to do, and there's a reason Tennessee's never done it. Auburn's done it one time 3 years ago. It's a challenge.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to do the math kind of in everybody's heads on what games to go to and different
Yeah.
stuff. I'm sure Greenville, a lot of people will be able to make that drive and it won't be too bad to pull that off. Then you have to do this math of like, all right, well, we can wait and see if we make it to New Orleans, but the odds are so low to do
Right.
that. Even if you make it to the Sweet 16, you're like, but I want to see this team play in the March. Do I
Yeah.
like spend my money on that and then know that like if they go to New Orleans, can have like the self-restraint to not also go there. I think it's easier for people that live down south. I'm sure 90% of the people that listen to this podcast live in the like within a couple hours of Auburn. And I think it'll be a little easier choice for them. They can spend their money going to Chicago for like a trip. And then if we do make the Final Four in New Orleans, that's not too bad as a car trip, like carpooling with other people and stuff. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll make it. Hopefully at least one of us makes it. You know, I think we'll figure some out. Otherwise, we'll probably do some live podcasting from St. Pat's in New York, the New York City Auburn Club. I'm hoping, you know, that'll be fun to do as long as we're winning. You know.
How did you feel overall about I felt like we got a appropriate amount of respect. It would have been great to get that last one seed, but obviously we kind of left a bad taste in everybody's mouth on Friday and really the last month or so, like we've been talking about on the podcast, just not quite the same. I felt like the draw, the seed, the location, I think we got treated pretty fairly today.
Yeah, after we lost Texas A&M, we kind of knew we got locked into it too. The only thing I could say about the disrespect from being a bit of a homer and just being like, why does a team that lost to Alabama that has more losses than us and also plays in the conference that Kansas won, which Kentucky beat them, and then we beat Kentucky. It just feels like the SEC is a bit like we know how deep the SEC is. You have a team like Alabama that went and beat Gonzaga, that beat Baylor, that beat Houston, and then has a losing record in the SEC. And like in a different sport or if this was a different conference, they'd be like, see how deep the SEC is? You can do that and then have a losing record in the SEC because the SEC is that deep. We're just not getting that same respect. I mean, maybe one day it'll happen or whatever, but I think that's part of it.
There's two ridiculous things that we have to talk about in the league, at least. Alabama being a 6, it's absurd. I saw that their net, which for a long time their metrics were just so good, and that's what everybody's like. Well, they have these wins and their metrics are great. Well, their net was 30. That's an 8 seed if you're just going by advanced metrics. How in the world do you get a 6 when you have 13 losses? You just can't convince me that Auburn at 19-13, and 9-9 in the SEC, and a first round exit in the SEC tournament would get a 6 seed. You just can't convince me of that. I don't think it's true.
Some of it, we talk about narratives and we talk about like it matters. The fact that the media picked them to be the first in the SEC and like they got to hype them up early on with a big win over Gonzaga and things like that. Like these media members, these committee members, everybody involved in this whole thing, they want to be right. We all want to be right. If we pick something one way or that, like there's this bias a little bit in your head that you have an expectation for where they should be, and when they don't meet it, that's an upset. Someone upset them. When if you had the other expectation, like, oh, they're not that great, and then they like do that, you're like, oh, they upset Gonzaga, and Alabama's actually like, it's weird, they've been jumping up or whatever, like it comes down to expectations. So all year long, their losses have been excused, and all year long, like their wins have been lauded. And so, I mean, they are a wacky team. We can admit they're wacky. Most teams don't do what they've done. It's all went back and forth between that 6 to 8 seed was they got picked to win early on. And so then it was expected when they did, Yeah,
it's crazy. And the other thing, I mean, how about Texas A&M going on their run, looking so good, having a better or even record with Alabama, I guess, in the regular season. They go further in the tournament. Not only do they not get in, which I think at least in the South, everybody, SEC never, everybody's like, oh yeah, like I think they've done enough. I thought they did enough when they beat us, let alone beating Arkansas and then, having to play a 4th game in 4 days, which by the way, if you watch that game today, you should really look back and appreciate what that Final Four team did at Auburn, because they looked so fresh on that 4th day, running the brakes off of Tennessee in Bridgestone Arena. But A&M not only doesn't get in, they were the 4th team out. Like they weren't even the next team in.
I saw a good tweet by somebody today. Shout out whoever this is in the Auburn Twitter that said, "Did the SEC tournament even matter? Did anything that happened in these 3 days actually matter?" Because you
Right.
think about it, like sure, we were talking about. I mean, the picks from Lenardi or whoever were Kansas and Baylor to be those number 1 seeds. Everybody's expecting them to like meet in the finals or whatever, and then like there's that chance if Auburn or Kentucky went all the way, they would take one of those seats, whoever that loser was in the Big 12. But if you just stop the season at the end of the season, this seeding would probably have held up for the SEC teams at least. Tennessee ends up with a 3 seed, which is almost like they didn't even do anything in the SEC. They probably would have been a 3 or 4 seed without all those wins in the SEC tournament. We didn't move hardly because we lost early. Texas A&M didn't make it in. Kentucky would have ended up with a 2 at the end of the season probably. So it's like, what does it even matter?
Well, I do think we as fans and the media get way out of control on conference championship week. You know, you look at this 2 or 3 game sample size, not 30, 32 games. And I think people get, but Indiana was in a similar boat, and they barely snuck in, but they snuck in with a great run in the Big Ten tournament, proving they could play with all these great teams. It just,
how
I
many
don't know.
teams did the SEC end up making? Because I kept hearing how many Big Ten teams made it. I just
And
really get irritated that they have this like respect for the SEC at the top, but like don't realize how deep the SEC is altogether. You know, I mean, the Big Ten last year and previous years too, it feels like they've lost a lot of games early, and then people are like, oh, and then they just do it again the next year. They just, I don't know.
Well, look at what A&M did. Look at Vanderbilt, you know, as the 11 seed in the SEC tournament. They had Kentucky all but almost beat, you know, with all the Big Blue Nation support and all the fans, you know, in Tampa cheering for them.
All the big out of conference games too were winners for the most part for the SEC. Like the Big 12 is supposed to be the best league right now, supposedly. At least that's what I've been hearing. And they lost. Baylor and Kansas lost to SEC teams. You know,
they
Oklahoma
lost the Big 12 SEC challenge overall. You know,
yeah. It feels like our crappy teams like Alabama are beating Gonzaga out there. So it's like actually Baylor lost. I don't know who. Actually, Baylor probably won against who? Tennessee at home for the SEC challenge, maybe, or who they play.
I forget.
No, they lost because they played Alabama. What am I thinking? They played Alabama and they lost. So Baylor, Kansas, and I guess who else is in there? Alabama, Gonzaga. They all lost. So I don't know whether the respect's not there. But this might be a good time to talk about. I mean, I guess we can go down the list here where some of these other teams ended up. And we can go to the SEC tournament a little bit too. But you know, we got LSU's in our little field or whatever you would call it. If we go to the Sweet 16, if we both win out, we'll play each other in the Sweet 16. That's interesting. They got an 8 seed. Let's see. Kentucky got a 2 against St. Peter's. They're across from Baylor ultimately in that on that side. I think they might have another SEC team in here. Nope, no other SEC teams in there. That Murray State game, it's Murray State versus San Francisco on the other side of their little like round of 32. Auburn fans are going to be going pretty nuts, I think, for that Murray State Kentucky game, if that comes to be. Alabama's a 6 seed over here in Gonzaga's bracket. Arkansas is pretty close to them. I guess it'll take a while if they play each other. They're not like on the
Elite Eight.
Yeah. Arkansas is a 4 seed against Vermont. They'd play New Mexico or UConn in there. Memphis, they won their tournament. I know they're not an SEC team, but we've talked so much about Memphis. They actually made it as a 9 seed. And then who else we got over here? Anyone? Tennessee as a 3 seed against Longwood. I don't know what the deal is with Longwood, but they are a team, I guess. And so that's all the SEC teams. What was that, 6 teams?
Yep, just 6. A&M would have been 7 if they were out.
Alabama also has an interesting matchup. They're playing one of those play-in games, which I heard today, a funny joke on the selection show. Supposedly the NCAA doesn't like to call them play-in games. Supposedly all these teams that are on here have made the NCAA tournament. These are just the first 4 or whatever they call it or something. It's not play-in. You're in already, which is just bullcrap. Can you imagine making the tournament for the first time in a long time and then being in the play-in game? Just screw it. Just don't pick us, you know?
But it feels like every year a team played, and it's always one of the 12s or 11s. The 16s never win. But not say never. Shout out to Virginia for losing to a 16. But it always feels like one of those teams, whoever wins the first 4, takes that momentum. They play 2 days later. They've gotten out the tournament jitters. And they just go ball out. So Alabama's going to play either a Notre Dame team who finished like 2nd in the ACC, was way down this year, but they were near the top of the league, or Rutgers, who has beaten 6 of those really good Big Ten teams this year. They're not going to be scared of playing Alabama.
Rutgers is really hot right now, right? Haven't they beaten like all the I don't know. I saw recently, like they were making memes on college basketball, like the Grim Reaper of Rutgers, because they had beaten like 3 or 4 big teams in a row in the last like month.
They've hit some buzzer beaters. They've been close. The Big Ten's just a gauntlet like the SEC is. They have Ron Harper Jr., who's his dad was with the Lakers all those years. He's a really good player.
We lost a kid to Rutgers in recruiting recently too. They're building a little bit.
Yeah.
They're building a little bit over there. And Notre Dame beat Kentucky earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough. Alabama got to, if you're looking for, solace in the fact that Alabama got a 6 seed, they're going to have to play the winner of that game. And by the way, Alabama has to go to San Diego for these first 2 games. They got to go cross country. And then if they somehow get to the Sweet 16, they'll have to play in San Francisco the next week against Duke, probably. So not an easy road.
They'll have to play Texas Tech in the second.
Well, Texas Tech would be in San Diego. Yeah, if they get past that first round, then they probably will have to play Texas Tech. That's tough. Then Duke's tough, and then potentially Gonzaga. So really brutal road for Alabama, and I love it. And I hope they lose the first round.
And their whole MO, it seems, this year is to lose to bad teams and win against good teams. It's might be a good thing they get to play some like lower. Yeah, they might be, anyways, they might be playing the Vanderbilt type that they can lose to.
Look, everybody says that, but they got swept by us. They lost to Tennessee, or no, they beat Tennessee once. They've lost to some good teams too. I was glad to see that they have such a difficult path. And again, the geography of this matters. Like if you talk to Bruce, that Final Four year was not only impressive for who they beat, it was impressive how far we had to go every round, like geographically, coming off playing 4 games in 4 days in the SEC tournament. So like Arkansas,
it makes planning these little like trips back home a lot easier. You play your 2 games, and then sometimes I think some of these teams like Alabama going from San Diego to San Francisco, they might have to do the math of like, we're just not going back. You know how it is. You plan a trip like that, a 2-week trip is way different when you're like trying to plan out what clothes to bring, what stuff to do, and what food to eat, what medicine to bring. These kids are like kids. They're college kids. You don't want they forgot back home or what, like it just changes things a lot.
Let's hope that doesn't happen, because I don't want them anywhere near the Sweet 16. So.
All right, well, that's kind of our NCAA stuff. I think we end up ultimately with a good path. We're going to have to fix some things in this week and get healthier and stuff for it to matter. But, if you're just taking a view of what's a good path, it's a good path, not bringing in what we've done so far in the season.
Well, and I would just say, as we kind of transition, you talk to anybody who's been around college basketball for a long time, they're going to tell you the best coaches find a way to get to lots of Sweet 16s. The best programs find their way to a lot of Sweet 16s. And then you just take your chances against the best in the country once you get to the Sweet 16. So Auburn has a really straightforward, difficult, potentially second round. But I mean, it's about as good, I think, with how we've played the last few weeks as we could have hoped for. So to me, that's kind of the target, is like, can you survive this weekend in Greenville, advance, figure some things out, and then take your shot against some really good teams after that, probably.
Yeah, after the bad loss to Texas A&M early in this SEC tournament, it's good that we got a good enough seed that feels like no matter what happens in this first game against a 15 seed Jackson State, like unless this thing is just completely broken, you can work out some kinks, hopefully. So we need that good little confidence. But this will bring us into the SEC tournament a little bit and into the kind of game talk. We'll get into that too. If you want to pull, I have the SEC tournament results pulled up. If you want to pull up the box score to that game against Texas A&M, it might be good to have. But the first round, Missouri beat Ole Miss, Vanderbilt beat Georgia, whatever, who cares, other than some of those coaches are fired now. The second round got interesting. A&M had a crazy comeback on Florida where they were down like 10 or something, or 13 or 15 or whatever.
You got that backwards. A&M was up 16 and Florida came back.
Okay, and it went to overtime. Crazy game. Exactly what we wanted. We didn't care who really won that game. Ultimately, we won Texas A&M, we thought, because we didn't want to play Castleton again, and Florida seemed to have our number a bit. And they went to overtime, which we really that's what we wanted, so that they could tire themselves out. Didn't seem to matter. But then LSU beat Missouri. That whatever. Mississippi State beat South Carolina. Who cares? But then the big upset was number 11 Vanderbilt over number 6 Alabama. That was great. You just, Nate Oates was trying to talk about how they were using our Final Four run as inspiration because they have a similar 3-point shoot. They could get hot. You never know. So they were saying go win the SEC tournament and you're back to where you won at the beginning of the year, whatever. And they lose in the first round, which is great. So then that sets up for our game at noon on Friday. It'll be 2 Fridays in a row that I'm not doing well at work. Put meetings on your schedule now, so no one puts any meetings on there. If you're a remote worker, like a lot of us, put some meetings on the calendar. But first game of the day, noon, we lose 67-62 to Texas A&M. Big upset. We'll keep going down the list before we start getting to the game, but Arkansas takes care of business against LSU, Tennessee over Mississippi State, Kentucky over Vanderbilt, even though that was a tough game for Kentucky. It's Vanderbilt, so good for them. So then it goes on to the next game, and we're like, oh no, we got upsets. Texas A&M's going against Arkansas. These are the big matchups that should have been that top four. That's a really solid top four. Well, it made us feel a lot better that Texas A&M did the exact same thing they did to us against Arkansas. It was a really hot team, and people were picking them to maybe win the whole tournament. And they held Arkansas to a really low percentage from three, like below 20, just like they did with us. And they shot above 50% from three, just like they did against us. So they just had really figured something out in those games, that the really good 3-point defense and hitting threes, which when they played us at home, Texas A&M was like ice cold from three. They didn't make a three the entire first half. And so for them to go to this game where the whole game they shot over 50%, 2 games in a row, some teams just get hot. Tennessee beat Kentucky. Great. We wanted that because we wanted Kentucky to not get that number 1 seed. It sucks. You wish both could lose, but whatever. And then you get to the championship, Tennessee versus Texas A&M. We're thinking, okay, maybe Texas A&M could do this Cinderella thing and keep Tennessee from finally winning a ring. Tennessee's been kind of our other like new blood rival for a little bit here. And they finally pulled it off. They finally got a ring. They won 65-50. I need ESPN to know that Tennessee won the SEC tournament championship and
Right.
stop calling them SEC champions. Like, we are the SEC. It's so annoying that 2 times now in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever, Tennessee is getting this like love as champions when really we're the real champions. We won the regular season a couple years ago and they tied us up at the end, or even though we beat them at home, and now they're winning a tournament during our regular season and people are calling them champions. Tournament champions, cool. We all know the regular season champions like a little more legit. I'm glad they didn't get it ultimately. I'm glad no one else got number 1 seed.
Yeah, me too. Look, Tennessee hadn't won the tournament since '79. Auburn hadn't won it since '85 when they won a few years ago. It was a long time, but we've ribbed Tennessee for a while, as they get a lot of hype and they really don't win anything. And they've only made 1 Elite Eight ever, which is what Auburn had done before Bruce arrived. So
and that Elite Eight was from Bruce.
But let's be clear. I don't know how you feel about it. I've watched a lot of basketball the last few weeks. Tennessee is playing really, really well. And I think they have a harder road. And that gives me some hope that maybe they're not going to break down that Final Four wall. But, man, a lot of people are going to be picking them because they have this – they're defending – they've always defended really well. That Rick Barnes is a great defensive coach, but offensively, it always felt like Auburn and these other teams just had more explosive offense. They're still not the most explosive offense, but they are so in sync with each other. They have an identity. They're playing really hard and together and gritty, and they just seem like a really solid group of old and young and big guys and small guys, and they're physical. I talked about that. So that's a lot about Tennessee. But
it feels like they have their chemistry right. While
yes.
ours is sputtering a bit, it's kind of almost hard to watch Tennessee right now because theirs seems to be so on. Their passing game is really interesting.
Yes.
They move the ball around a lot and put in a lot of hands while we're doing kind of the opposite, and it's been frustrating to watch on our side. So
they have an offensive identity. They have an offensive system that they're so comfortable with after 32 games or whatever. And Bruce is never going to look like that, so I don't think we should compare to that necessarily. But they look like very dangerous. If you're looking for a positive at how do we keep Tennessee from matching our Final Four or whatever, it would be they have to go through Villanova and Arizona in the same bracket. I think they have a pretty easy path to the Sweet 16, but after that, it could get really tough.
Yeah, so that was kind of the narrative of the SEC tournament, is that Texas A&M had a bit of a Cinderella run. We all thought they did enough to make it to the tournament, and they didn't. The other narrative now that we've seen the seeding of NCAA, and this is why we wanted to do the show after that everything's done, because the narrative's changed since they went out and beat Arkansas too. All of a sudden, our loss to them is not quite as bad. And then the fact that after all this said and done, the seeding kind of still ended up being exactly where we thought it was going to be. If Tennessee had ended up being number 1 seed after this, we'd be a little more upset that we allowed this in our magic season. We allowed Tennessee to kind of steal the thunder at the end there.
Well, two things. One, Tennessee kind of got hosed because the committee has a history of these Sunday results. They don't take them into account because they have to build this thing out with all the locations and this, like, the Big Ten is always, it never matters. Iowa won and had a great win over Purdue today. They still were a 5 seed because that game ended 10 minutes before the selection show, and they don't have. So I think Tennessee had that happen a little bit. I think they probably should have been on the 2 line, but because they had already put it out, they end up as a 3. That's stupid. It's 2022. The NCAA should figure that out. The other thing I would say, A&M doing this in the SEC tournament made they are now a quad 1 loss for us. All of our losses this year were to quad 1, opponents. So I think that helped our cause when it came down to the bracket as well.
Yeah, I'm glad the committee seems to take a longer view on some of this stuff.
Yep.
I'm glad they seem to do that because ESPN seems to be going the opposite, Yeah. So this can kind of get us into the game here a little bit. So we lost in the first round. I'm glad we have a couple days to take a breath. Matt gets my most angry text. Like, it's interesting. We get into it sometimes when we have bad losses like this, that I'm like, the sky is falling. Everything's going so badly. We're completely broken. And Matt's like getting angry at me. Like, what? So you just giving up on the team? You're going to go volunteer again? Because one time I threatened to go volunteer instead of watch Auburn sports anymore because they just disappoint me and I could do better things in my time. And
that was a different sport. That was a different sport, by the way.
Yeah. Basketball's never done that to me. I still believe in basketball. It's not completely broken me. But man, this was a tough one. I'm glad we had a little more perspective on it. My narrative's still a little bit on this game and like this kind of end of season sputtering that's been happening. I think we've sealed the deal that it's not just, we had to play at Arkansas and at Tennessee, and then you throw in this at Florida where we lost by 1, and it's kind of, but then you add, you just have those 3 and you do whatever against Mississippi State. Then like, you're like, okay, well, we played a lot of tough away games. It's really tough to win away. It's kind of crazy. But then you throw in the overtime at Mississippi State. Then you throw in this Texas A&M game. And I think you have to admit that we're not trending in the right direction at all. And it's not just because we played tough people. In my kind of like metaphor, I think that's just like workable or whatever. So we've been kind of like a NASCAR driving around the track, leading the pack. We need to change the tires. We need to change the oil. We need to adjust a couple things, but we're leading. And there's only a couple laps left. I think we can push it. Just keep the engine going. It's going to red line. We know it's going to overheat, but we just don't want to change anything about this car when we're already winning and we're so close to like doing something we've never done or haven't done hardly ever in our history, like winning an SEC regular season. You don't want to screw something up right at the end. And it feels like the engine is finally blown. We blew a gasket or whatever. And maybe in this week or whatever, it's not something too serious and we can get in there and change this or that or whatever, cool the engine off and it's fine. Or maybe the engine is just freaking blown up and we just have lost. It just feels like we've lost the confidence. We've lost it doesn't feel right. Something has to change. And it feels like we waited too late to change it.
Well, I think you're also, I don't know what specifically people want to do that doesn't involve scrapping our existing rotation and completely changing our offensive approach after 32 games. Like, I think people kind of underestimate or overestimate what the options are at this point. You can work on shot selection. You can work on the distribution of shots. You can work on, what play calls we're gonna do, and what looks we're gonna try. And ultimately, I don't know what your thoughts on this game were. To me, we missed a lot of open shots, and A&M made a bet. A&M made a bet in this game that was very smart. And going into it, they just said, hey, if Auburn hits a bunch of threes to beat us, that's fine. We're going to defend the lane at all costs. We're going to help down low against their bigs. We're going to out physical. I think the book is out that you can try to rough us up inside, and we don't handle it very well.
It was like every time someone drove the ball, the guy that should have been on the 3 was crashing in every single time and daring us to kick it. And we kicked it and we kicked it and we kicked it. And I don't blame them at all for trying to hit those threes for like the first 3/4 of the game. I was like, you have to, if they're going to keep giving you open threes, you got to keep shooting and they will eventually go down. We've seen it a million times where eventually they go down. Well, they eventually went down like right at the end, but we've been doing that a lot lately where we like try to do these furious comebacks and it's not,
But
something's off.
You're right. You're right though. Like the adjustment there, I think we started 0 for 14 from 3 or something ridiculous. We missed every open shot. It was kind of like, it just felt like the biggest disaster game we've had. We may have felt like we had the disaster game, but this was the ultimate, like, nothing's going right. A&M super, again, at that point, they're like, this is our opportunity to go to the tournament. We got to beat this Auburn team. We just played yesterday. We're used to the court. We're used to the rims. Let's go take them out. And they did. Honestly, it's a real testament to this group at Auburn that they even had a shot, and we'll talk about why, but not only just that the score was close. They held A&M in the 60s. They won turnovers. They won rebounds. They won bench points. They won blocks. They won steals. They tied assists, as bad as that offensive game was. They did not play a bad game in any other capacity other than shooting. They just could not make shots. And sometimes we get too in depth with basketball. It's about making open shots when you get them and creating open shots. And Auburn's offense wasn't great, but they had plenty of good looks at the rim. They had good looks inside. They had good looks outside. The crazy thing is, I'm done. I know I'm ranting. The last, everybody at halftime was like, we got to drive the ball. We got to drive the ball. We got to drive the ball. Well, statistically, we were getting more points per play from 3 than from 2 at that point. Even as horrid as that first half was, we weren't getting anything. My point is, we weren't making anything inside over their length and their double.
30 on the whole game, 30% from the field, 25% from 3. And that was after this.
And that's with Wendell
comeback at the end.
Right.
Where we hit a bunch of stupid threes that were crazy. But man, there's some metrics out there people were sharing on Twitter. People knew this was a crazy, weird game, which is how bad we were shooting and how rare that is. And there were some metrics about that do kind of shot selection versus anyways, they're saying with that shot selection, with the shots we took and the stats we had in the rest of the game, 75% of the time, the team that has Auburn stats would have won. It just happened to be that 25% of the time where just everything went wrong or whatever. And there's also stats going around showing the shot table of where all the shots were and just showing how insane how many threes we shot and how many they missed. I mean, we shot 36 threes to their 16. We shot 20 more threes than them. I mean, that's part of the game. They were daring us to do that
and made the same amount. They hit 8 of 16. We were 9 of 36. Looking back, it obviously feels really stupid that we took 36 threes and only 33 twos. We took more threes than twos on a day where we couldn't hit anything. But again, part of that, I think your criticism is fair. Part of it is we were getting those open looks early, and that is so much part of our DNA when you kick to the open shooter and you shoot it, right? We've been wanting our shooters to shoot in rhythm. Well, they did that, but didn't feel like they were a little hesitant, and then we were just slow to adjust. We were slow to adjust that the threes aren't going down. We need to force some action and do some other things.
You talk about the hesitancy, and that's part of the reason why it's easy as fans and easy as we've all been there as leaders in some sort of club or whatever, or most of us probably have. And people can tell you things aren't going right or things are going wrong or they're upset or whatever, but no one ever brings to you how to fix it or anything like that. They just want to let you know that they're upset about this or whatever. So it's easy for us to be upset and say this car is broken and we don't know what's going on. But yeah, we don't know exactly how to fix it, because if we do start messing with all the lineups and putting people in here and there and playing less minutes here and there, stuff you can already see that Wendell and KD, and there's some weird stuff going on with their confidence right now. And you texted me or talked to me or at one point that Jabari had a moment where he it felt like he looked around and was like, what is going on? How can I not get some help out here? What do I need to do? I've done all the alpha moves. I've done all the things and it's still not working. I'm sure Kessler's having his moments too with his sore shoulder now. They clearly tried to work it to Kessler early in the second half, which I loved, but he got into a little foul trouble at time, or only 2, but it felt like he was in a little bit of some issues and it just didn't work. I don't know. You can mess with something's got to go with the guards. We should have been doing it weeks ago, but because we were winning, we didn't. There is something going on with the threes. They are trying some new stuff. They're playing Chris Moore a little more. Clearly, there's if we're diagnosing the issues with this team, Walker and Jabari are still playing great. There's we can get into the ISO Jabari alpha guy stuff in a little bit, but the biggest issues are the 3 and the guards. And we know the biggest thing are the threes. They cannot seem to hit an open 3. I mean, I'm yelling at my screen when Cambridge shoots a 3 at all, which is so bad. But it's gotten to that point where even an open 3 is not a good shot for Cambridge. He's shooting like 16% or something like that in conference from three. And it looks so bad right now too. Like, so he, even an open three is not good for him. So sure, they're going to definitely dare you to do that and definitely bring in who's supposed to be guarding that three into the lane because they can't do anything. Then you got Flanagan, who we've talked about a million times. Also not a great three shoot. He's hit a one or two now recently, but still just not confident in that three. Takes a charge. Like we have a little check marks. I have my text groups with some of my friends. Check mark, Alan Flanagan took a charge. Check mark, Alan Flanagan airballed a three. And so it's going badly there. So we're playing Chris Moore a little more. He doesn't have any offense. So we know the three position is killing us right now because not only are they not doing well, they're also like allowing the other team to crash in on the that. But that's not the only issue. If that was the only issue, we could kind of work around it. But then you're like compounding it with whatever's going on with the guards right now. And this might be a good time to hear some thoughts from Matt on KD Johnson's all-time. No one's had this bad of a game, and like they had some stats like 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen in my time watching basketball anybody go 0 for 14 from the field, in part because you never see a guy shoot 14 times if he doesn't make one. But so that's KD. But a lot of those weren't bad looks. It was just one of those. He forced some and he had some frustrations. I think the bigger thing for him, look, 0 for 14 is a disaster. And honestly, I know we've said this after every loss, and maybe it sounds like I'm just trying to be positive, but it is honestly incredible that we had that KD Johnson stat line and nothing from the threes. Really only two guys scored for us. And we were down, like we had a chance there at the end to like almost steal it. Like it really blows your mind when you look at this stat sheet, when you look at the box score. How was Auburn even close? I mean, I know Wendell got crazy hot there at the end and took some crazy shots, but it just says, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. KD was terrible. And the worst thing about it, 0 assists, 3 turnovers. He had gotten so much better at distributing, sharing the ball. He's the guy throwing the post touches to the inside guys. He's the one that's maybe he seemed like he had kind of figured out his time to be quiet and time to be loud. And it just felt like he was in such a good place. This really calls that into question. You hope it's just one game. We know his confidence is always sky high. But man, what a brutal.
His confidence is not sky high from catch and shoot three. He does this weird thing, which we said a game or two ago, that just, all right, give up, I guess, because he couldn't do a catch and shoot three. He missed a bunch of them when we actually got him to do that. So like he's got to do this weird like dribble three where he like pump fakes and then dribbles over and shoots a three. Couldn't make any of those this game. The craziest thing, you said the craziest thing is him not getting any assist. And he's like, I think the craziest thing is him not finishing it all at the rim.
Yep.
0-6 from three, but 0-14 from the field. That means he wasn't finishing at the rim a bunch. And he's been great at some of these finishes.
Or mid-range.
Yeah, and he takes some risks. He does on some of these drives, but we need him to. And a lot of times he finishes with some circus stuff. He not only didn't finish those circus shots, he didn't finish regular stuff. He didn't finish in transition. He didn't have a Hamburglar moment. It just, and what a terrible time to have like a confident shaking moment. The game before you need your guys at their all-time highs. And so like, luckily we have that game that maybe we could work some things out in the Jack State game, but I feel like you might need a game or two to work out what's going on with KD right now.
Yeah, you just hope he bounces back. He really had played, he won us that conference title pretty much single-handedly in that road to overtime against Mississippi State and getting to overtime. And then, I thought he played a lot better against South Carolina too. So you just hope this is kind of a blip in the road for him. I'm sure Jabari said after the game that he's like the thing I'm least worried about is KD Johnson. I know he's going to come back and be ready to go and be excited. So they're saying the right things. Having said that though, I think that we need to talk about Wendell, but
yeah.
I'll ask you this question. My answer is off the court, but when you look at the last month or so and how things have gone, are you more concerned with the stuff you see happening on the court, or are you more concerned with stuff between the ears, the chemistry, the confidence, like which side, or is it just both kind of 50-50?
I wish I knew more. Like, I wish I was some basketball, like we talk about this podcast, but it's more for our own like fan enjoyment, or I wish I could diagnose. And we've asked coaches on this podcast. We've had Steven and Wes on, we've had former players on, like, what have teams figured out about us? I think you ask one or the other. The problem is we got both right now. Like, That's the real issue. It's not to cop out of that answer, but the head stuff's, I'm afraid the head stuffs is creeping in because we've been playing so badly that teams have kind of figured out these guards and what they're, like they're coming up and pressuring them and they're not being able to get these passes off and they're freaking out a bit. And these threes have been so bad that they're not helping out at all with these guards. And like, so then it all leaves it up to Jabari and Walker all by themselves kind of, and we can't even get the ball properly because our guys are freaking out there. So it's like chicken or the egg, but it feels like it started because they figured something out about us that we haven't been able to hit them back with a counter punch. We haven't figured out that counter attack and chess or whatever. And so now it's getting in our heads that we haven't figured that out. Why haven't we figured that out? Why can't I hit that shot in here? And that's because they've taken away all my good shots,
Right.
And that's part of the thing I was thinking about this game. And I was going to bring up that is so concerning is, we have been able to keep some of these games close and stuff down the stretch. That's interesting. But the biggest great thing about this team was that if one thing's not going right, we have like 5 different answers. This guy will do something. That guy will do something. Oh, well, if we can't, the 3 games off, we'll go to the lob and the pick and roll lob to Kessler game. We'll have KD drive it more. If that stuff's getting taken away, we'll start shooting and hit some stuff. We'll have Jabari hit things. It feels like they've taken away a lot of our stuff, and it's coming down to the only thing left is Jabari hitting these like crazy ISO stuff. And then even Kessler's offensive game, which he's like developed so well, we just never have figured out exactly how to like really make him the like focal point. And the closest we've really seen is kind of like the beginning of that second half, honestly, where it felt like they were trying to work the ball through Kessler. So it just feels like we've had all our tools taken away here right at the end.
Yeah, and we really just need a couple guys. And I don't even care who it is. If we just had, because here's the thing. This team doesn't need to be. We've talked so much. This team is so different from that 2019 team. They're built completely different. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. We don't need to be an elite offensive team to go far in this tournament. We really don't. We are a terrific defensive team. We have more size and star power than I think we've ever had. Stars do well in the tournament. I have no doubt that Jabari's going to be ready to go. Walker, I still don't think he looks the same defensively. You just have to hope that this is an entire week off. We got the Friday game for the first round. We were out Friday lunchtime. You hope that whatever's going on with his shoulder, he looked better. It wasn't as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago, but it still just doesn't feel like that A&M kid torched him multiple times in that game, in the post or on the glass, or putting, just didn't feel like he could block it. Like he was so good at blocking everything. Anyway, I'm so scattered tonight, y'all. I'm so excited, and I'm mad at the same time now that we're talking about this game. What about Wendell? I think he's the core thing about this game and the last few weeks that we need to talk about Wendell, and then I want to talk about like reasons to be really scared going into the NCAA tournament, and then reasons that we should be like optimistic, because I think there are plenty on both sides.
Yeah, Wendell. Everybody's talking about Wendell.
Yep.
One of my big things that I hate right now, we joke about the Cambridge alley-oops and the Wendell logo threes. Me and Matt had a discussion earlier, like off on the thing, that I think we realized the difference. I love a Wendell logo 3 and a Jared Harper logo 3 when we're on our runs. That's when we want them to take that risk. Like I'll give Wendell a logo 3 in transition or whatever, like once, not in those runs, not otherwise. And then everything else, if you're going to do that, should be a part of a run, kind of like we are going down there and doing something in transition and you can go hit something. He's been doing it for a while now, like when we're in lulls, like as if he's going to be the guy that does the like run breaker. We know Jabari's our run breaker. When things aren't going right, Jabari goes hits that shot. We know now that when things aren't going right, Wendell's going to take a stupid long 3 that's going to make the other team's run even worse. And so it's very frustrating. He's been kind of a liability with the ball at the end of games and in these runs. He just takes the ultimately like worst shot. And then in this game, when we were down so much, we needed like this furious comeback. All of a sudden, Wendell hits like 3 threes in a row from the same spot, really far away. And I almost hate him. Like if we had pulled that game off, then like, all right, screw it, whatever. This game needed to be a learning experience. And that's part of the thing that we need to talk about too, is that we kept talking about, like, you got to learn from these losses. It doesn't feel like we ever learned anything from these losses that we've had, really. I don't feel like we've made these adjustments off of losses. And I'm afraid that him hitting those threes is just going to keep giving him the confidence to shoot dumb shots when we have great players on this team he can pass to.
Well, I have that fear too. I'll agree with you on that. But I do think he deserves some credit because if you recall, Jabari was hot to start the game and then bad. Jabari wasn't good against A&M. He started missing free throws. He was 3 for 10 from three, never really looked into rhythm, looked frustrated at times. First time really I've seen him all year kind of just look a little off. There was nobody to bail us out when we were down 15 or 20 at that point, whatever it was. And Wendell, I get it. I hear your point, but he almost stole us that. Like you said, if Jabari hits that, he almost had a 4-point play, or he got a steal. And if he hits that shot in the corner, it's a tie game or a 1-point game, and we foul and we get it back and we win, you're praising Wendell all day. So I think he deserves credit for the guts to take and make those shots. Maybe I've said for a while, I think he's the key. If for Auburn to go far, he's got to be closer to what he was in that 19-game win streak. And that was really the first time in a while that we saw that flash of like, oh yeah, like, gosh, that guy is willing to battle and take and make those tough shots. Now, is that sustainable? No.
It's not an offense. I'm just, yeah.
But is it it almost stole us a game we had no business of winning. So
I'm tired of trying to steal games we had no business of winning. I want to be in position to win a game.
Well,
I texted Matt, and even if we pull this thing off, I'm upset. Like, this team has got issues, because we've done this a couple times now where we do these furious comebacks. Stop being in position where we have to do this. It's ridiculous. And part of the other thing that's interesting, Wendell has ended up with these assists or whatever, but it just feels like he's gotten really bad at getting the offense started. We've been we just haven't gone on the run in a long time. It doesn't feel like we've played that transition, fast break Auburn offense in a long time. Mm-hmm. And then once we are in that half court, a lot of times it feels like he just cannot get the offense started. We just need to don't take that shot. Don't immediately go waste a possession by not getting the ball to anybody. I'm cool with him taking some long threes if he needs to, open threes especially. He needs to start driving a little more, I think, and getting in the middle, which we talked about. Maybe that's what they're trying to take away from him, making him either go too fast downhill or stay too high up, and they're avoiding the middle. So maybe that's part of it that we have to figure out. But it just feels like, man, if we're in a half-court offense, you better pass that ball at least once before it comes back to you. I don't want to see another possession where that ball doesn't at least get in somebody else's hands. And really, it should be him trying to work it into our best players' hands in good positions, and he's not doing that at all. So I think we've talked about the Jabari ISO stuff. It's annoying to me that we can't seem to get Jabari actual good shots half time. It doesn't seem to matter because he makes these insane shots or whatever. Maybe that's part on Jabari for not getting in those positions. But it's been a long time since I feel like I've seen Wendell give Walker a good shot. He did have one good alley-oop that I was proud of him on, because he put it really high up, and Walker got that thing. And I was like, that's exactly what I want. If you have to take a risk to get it up there to him, do it, because he's going to go get it. But it just feels like Wendell's a little frazzled. His head's down a little bit, and he's not looking around. He's not playing. I've talked about how Wendell's kind of a baller. Dude just balls. He's small, but you could tell he's just kind of freestyling out there. He doesn't look like he's freestyling at all anymore. He looks like he's the game's maybe a little too fast for him right now.
Well, yeah, I think he's still playing his same game, but the problem is when you go from being a small guard from Eastern Kentucky to what he did when he started getting hot, what teams start realizing who kind of does, I always say stirs the drink, but who seems to really make Auburn really good in this long winning streak? That's that short kid. And if we can frustrate him, if we can pick him up higher, if we can send him two big guys, defend in such a way that we're not going to give him any space, we're going to keep him out of the middle of the lane for those lobs. We're going to make him take an awkward mid-range floater instead of a three or a layup like Bruce wants in his offense. And it just feels like we haven't cracked that code. But I said a few weeks ago, I still think it's true. Jabari is our alpha. He's our guy. We're going to go a lot of, him and Kessler have a lot to say about how far this team goes. But if you've watched the tournament for any time at all, and if you've watched college basketball, it's a guards game, and your guards cannot be a huge liability. And I will not and have not said that Wendell's a liability. I just want to be clear for the podcast that is my co-host who has said that. I don't think he's a liability. By the way, shout out Ben Young. Great stat he sent me on Twitter that our highest plus minus on the season is Wendell Green on this entire
plus minus stuff. The fact that the Wendell is like, I saw the stat. It was amongst SEC players too. The
Yeah.
Wendell's like the highest plus minus and all that.
Yep.
Somebody come on and explain me plus minus, because Jabari Smith is like way down the list. And I'm like, clearly Jabari Smith is the best player out there. So I don't want to, if clearly the stat is messed up, not the like.
No, the stat's good if you take 30 something games into account, because it's how well is your team doing when you're on the floor versus everybody else. And what that tells you, what that tells me, is that Wendell was tremendous in that time where we looked our best. He was, every time he came off the bench, it was like instant offense, and our team would, if we were behind, we would go up, and if we were up, we would start pulling away. And he's had enough of those great games. You talked about the MVPs when you talked earlier, that even with the struggles lately, even when it feels like we've been stagnant when he's on the floor, he's still the top SEC guy in terms of the most points gained by your team when this one player is on the floor.
In my book, plus minus is a trash stat. And until someone comes on here and explains to me how it's put together, then I'm not taking it seriously.
You don't know how it's put together?
I mean, they say it's like based off of how much better the other player, like your player, is versus when he's off the court or whatever. But it just never seems to work out very well. Like Cambridge goes off for 30 plus or whatever, and you're like, how? The guy didn't do anything in the game.
No, okay. All it is, there's no, this is not a magical stat. This is just when Wendell Green's on the floor, Auburn has outscored their opponents by over 200 points this year. When that's it.
Compared to
nothing. When Wendell Green is on the floor, Auburn has outscored their opponents by 200 plus points.
Okay, all right.
It's not a good stat for one game. There's 5 guys on the floor, but over a season, and Jabari and Walker were on that top 10 list in the SEC, right? So they're really good too. But it says a lot about Wendell. I just still believe, and this is not going to make you happy, and I think it makes us all a little nervous, but I really feel like Wendell's the key. Like if Wendell plays okay to well, like above average, I think we can go a long way in this tournament. If he is turning the ball over, not getting his assists up, not sharing the ball, especially the unnecessary, untimely turnover. I get more mad about the turnovers than the shot selection, although it has been bad at times too. Then that's going to be a problem, unless KD and Zepp and others can bail him out. But Wendell's been the most consistent offensive threat at the guard position.
An interesting thing I think we've seen, you talk about the double teaming. I think KD and Wendell have gotten in trouble with double teams because they're so small, they can't throw over the guy and make them pay. So Walker can be wide open underneath the basket, but when they go double up there and they can't get the ball out to them and they turn the ball over or they have to call a timeout or whatever, people are going to keep doing that to us. They've been doing it to us, or like at least put like having a larger point guard type out on Wendell and pushes him way up the court and just completely like trashes the offense for a good like 5 to 10 seconds while Wendell tries to figure out how to dribble out of it. That doesn't happen with bigger guards a lot of times. They can stop and get that ball over to somebody. And so I think that's something people have figured out about us, and we have to figure out whatever the counter punch is. And you just hope there is, that they're the counter, because we don't have another tall guy. Like the things we've kind of seen them adjust to just recently is the 3 stuff, playing Chris Moore a little more. And then also we've seen some possessions where it's 3 guards out there, right? KD, Zepp, and Wendell at the same time with Jabari and Walker, I think, or maybe some other people out there. So maybe they'll experiment a little more. It's just so tough to experiment this late. You kind of hope maybe it's like you hold your breath and hope it's just a shooting slump that we get out of, but I don't know. I feel like you have to do something.
So let's talk about the reasons for Auburn fans to be very nervous going into this tournament. Let's make a list real quick. You want to throw something out first? We'll just kind of go back and forth.
We can just throw out my nightmares or whatever, that like Wendell completely gets frazzled out there and turns the ball over a bunch of times and can't get the offense going at all, that we keep shooting this badly, that Wendell's attitude of like, I'm the man that's going to shoot all these 3 keeps happening. And in a game that's this stressful in the NCAA tournament, we crack as a team. And like Jabari like yells at Wendell on the sideline, or KD yells at somebody, or vice versa. Bruce gets a tech out there. We can't get anything together because our shooting's so bad. And in the moment after all this, if this was just one game in the tournament where everything just was going badly, I don't think this team would crack. But we're getting to a point where you could see like this talk about Jabari's got to be an alpha and go say, give me the ball. Well, you say, give me the ball to KD. he might not and say, screw you, I'm going to go do it. And then all of a sudden you have like this fracture, and then you have a Walker Kessler that's maybe injured out there, gets one little twinge on his shoulder and just completely is not as good. And this team, like, it's just not the same team if Walker's not out there ready to go, and he might get more foul trouble because he's a little slower. He can't get his arm where he needs to
be. You're getting very specific. I was thinking no, those are all good things. I'm thinking like, obviously, outside shooting is a major concern for us. Like we haven't been a good shooting team all year. Bruce said something that we had made like 8 or 10 threes, the Mississippi State game and South Carolina game. We ended up making 9 here, but we both know it was terribly inefficient and it was all kind of late garbage time stuff. So he thinks like that's a great number for us. If we can make, and I heard A&M's Buzz Williams, great coach, by the way, he did a tremendous job this week. But somebody said if A&M hits 8 threes, you're in trouble because they are going to guard the crap out of you. They're going to go downhill. They're going to get fouled. They're going to get points at the free throw line. I think for Auburn, just hitting some out, we saw how rough it is when nobody can make it. It sounds simple, but you've got to just hit some outside shots, and it has to be somebody other than Jabari. We know we're going to get some shots from Jabari. So outside shooting's a big one.
Yeah, you said the inside game would have opened up a little more if we just hit a couple early threes.
It would. Right. And the strategy on that for the A&M game was like, well, how do you break A&M out of that defense they were playing? Somebody's got to hit some shots, and it just never happened. Do
you feel like there's any issue with the energy right now? I've made that my pregame note a couple times now. Can we match the other team's energies coming out of halves? And it feels like, I mean, part of it's because we've been the number one team. We've been going to these different away games. They have this like extra, like, we're going to be the underdogs and go get them. We got to keep that same attitude. It doesn't feel like, maybe it's just because things aren't going right shooting wise, or so they didn't feel right, but it doesn't feel like we got that dog mentality that we're like swiping at things and going ham, and the speed just doesn't look as fast. Like that Texas A&M team looked so fast. They looked like they were constantly coming out at it always felt like every shot we made, there was a guy flying at our guy trying to stop it. It doesn't always feel like that from our team right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think one of my biggest concerns is just the lack of people hate on Jimmy Dykes. I think Jimmy Dykes is a terrific analyst. He talks about those two teams today, A&M and Tennessee. They played with conviction, and there's a difference between playing with energy and playing with conviction. And I think that's what you're touching on. A&M came to Tampa with a clear mission on how they were going to win these games, and they went out and executed it. And I think Auburn at its best is Auburn controls the game. We push the pace. We play our style. We're going to get up in you defensively. We're going to play aggressive. We're going to force steals. We're going to block shots. We're going to fly around. We're going to hit some crazy shots that we probably shouldn't take. And we're going to play with swagger and energy and confidence. And that's a BP thing. Every player we talk to, Bruce gives everybody confidence to shoot. We talked to Horace Spencer about the famous three-point shot. You should listen to it here in a minute. This team just feels so opposite of that right now. And that's the concern, the lack of confidence, the peacock energy, the swagger, the identity. Can you find that in a week where you're not playing a game? And I find that hard to believe, but I also saw them do it a few weeks ago, so I know it's there somewhere.
I was literally about to say, like, you hope you can, like, Bruce Pearl is a master motivator.
He is.
You hope that, like, he can manufacture some confidence. Like, I don't know if you like show them tape from earlier in the season, be like, this is you guys, like, this is you. Or if you like somehow get like some fun, get like when the Mighty Ducks were in the Olympics, they went and played some street hockey in Compton with Keenan Thompson, and it got their swagger back. And they said, yeah, we're having fun out here. We're the Ducks. So we need some duck energy in there. Yeah. Sorry for the 90s metaphor for all of you guys.
No, I mean, as silly as this whole thing is, right? The peacock, like, it's come to symbolize this fan thing, this fan perspective, and which has been tested, right? Like, our fanhood of this team is being tested a little bit, and how confident and how much swagger we're going to have. I love personally that Bruce is our coach to try to, if it's a motivational thing, Bruce is going to figure it out. Okay. No one thinks this Auburn team is going anywhere. And I don't blame them for not picking us. But if you don't think that's going to be used as kind of a, hey, y'all are the champ. You talked about it. Y'all are the champs of one of the toughest leagues in the country. Y'all handled the gauntlet away from home. You had more road wins than anybody else. Y'all can do this. He's going to get them ready. The question is, though, the tentativeness on offense and the inability to like play confidently in the flow, it's really shocked me. In that A&M game, it just felt like everybody outside Jabari was just a little unsure of themselves. And that is very troubling because I don't know if that's a 1 week fix.
It says something about our seeding as AA that I didn't say this immediately, but before this SEC tournament, I even like put on Reddit or whatever. I was like, time to get that confidence back. We've been on a little bit thin. We're about to show people that we're going to come in this SEC tournament and do something. We're going to turn this thing around a bit. And we did not. And so I told some friends too, I was like, man, like a week ago, I would have like been like, oh yeah, don't pick us at your own risk in this NCAA tournament. Pick us as an early upset on your own risk. Sure, that's the hot thing because we lost at Arkansas and Tennessee. Okay, but this is going to be different in the tournament. Now, after losing this Texas A&M game and that Mississippi State overtime, I'm like, listen, I'm not good. Like my friends, if you want to pick us losing out early, I'm not actually going to blame you. I'm hoping because the opposite. And this team could easily go the other way and completely turn this thing and be right back where we were a month or two ago. But I'm not going to blame anyone that's picking us early,
Sure.
And that's some other seeding is what I was getting to, that I didn't immediately say that, like, oh man, I'm worried about that second round game or that third round game. We got some good seeding. Like there could be a lot more teams that like we could go out in the first round, but just seeding wise, I'm feeling a little better than I was before the tournament.
Well, and again, this was our worst shooting game of the year. It was in the same arena as our second worst shooting game of the year, which is weird, but it was with Wilson Ball. So if you're looking for Wilson to bail you out, we can't use that anymore. It has been broken.
Well, if we want to talk about some pro stuff real quick and Peacock real quick, we still have the best player in the freaking country.
Yeah.
We've seen this man shoot some amazing shots. The amount of times I've seen, like it's been several times this year, including this game, where we saw like March Madness moments from him where he caught that ball, did a 360 and drained a three in these huge moments. It's almost sad that we've not yet had a moment with Jabari in a close game against a good team where his shot has actually mattered. He's made some amazing, like, oh my God, somebody turned all the stats to 10. You're cheating. You put a cheat code in to hit that shot or whatever. Like if you're online gaming, you'd be accusing the other guy of using some bots or something to hit that shot. It hasn't mattered yet, but maybe it will. And we know it's possible. So that's one of my first peacocks. Got Jabari Smith.
Yeah, that's a great point. That starts with Jabari. He is, there's only one of him. We have him. I don't remember a time we've ever had that guy going into a tournament. We have that guy. There is a strong history of stars like this. Sure, people lose, people get upset. No one's going to pick us to go to the Final Four. That's fine. But we have that guy that can go off and get tough shots. We know he's there. We know he's our best player. Everybody on this roster, as much as you might say, Wendell, that everybody knows who our guy is. Now, the problem is everybody else knows it too, and they're going to make life very difficult for him, just like the SEC has tried to do. So it starts with him. I would say the second thing is our defense. You look at our losses, as ugly and horrendous as they've been. It's 2 overtime games, a 1-point loss, a 5-point loss, a 5-point loss. All those are on the road, not and neutral site, I guess. So we still, this was a blowout. Okay, I'm not going to say this is a close game because we lost by 5. We got blown out on Friday against A&M. However, it does mean something in a sport where the 50-50 coin flip of these games, these late game situations. I don't think Auburn's ever going to be out of it with this group. I think they've proven that they're going to come back time and time again. The key for us is being able to play ahead. We've been playing these 50-50 games for the last month, and we've lost about half and we won about half. And we've got to get back to being 5, 10, 15 points ahead so you're not in danger of getting upset, which is what all this March Madness stuff comes down to. Can you position yourself in the last TV timeout to not be behind or not be tied up with somebody worse than you? Like, that's the goal. That's the goal. Can we do that? And I think the defense and our half-court defense is so solid. The rebounding, knock on wood, the last few games has been much better. If we rebound well, our first shot half-court defense is fantastic. And I think it'll keep us in every game we get to play this month.
Another peacock thing here is that we've kept all these games super close in an amazing conference with Jabari and Walker and Clester. All it takes, we're just asking for one player to step up amongst these like 1, 2, and 3 positions. You have one guy get a little hot, like a Javon McCormick did in our Final Four run, And this team can be churning on all cylinders. All it takes is one other guy to like the odds that we don't have one other guy step up, the odds that Wendell can't step up, that Zep can't step up, that KD can't step up, that Alan Flanagan can't, all at the same time. Those odds are a lot lower, you know what I'm saying, than the other way around. So I feel like it's so like all it's got to take is one clip. We saw Zep do some things in a couple of games now. All it takes is a little thing, a little magic. You've all seen in March Madness when some of these teams like UCLA last year gets from a freaking 11 or 12 seed all the way. It just these one little adjustments that you don't know you have in you until March. And we've seen each one of these guys do it. We've seen this team on full like cylinders or whatever. A lot of teams haven't even seen that until they got to March and all of a sudden something turned on. We just need one thing to turn on and it could really avalanche into something crazy. And we have the guys to do that. So I think we are in a slump, but
it feels like we're so close to be it, or I guess it feels like it doesn't take much to get us out of this, right? It really does. Like if we just can build some confidence, have a couple guys hit some shots. You go back how often all year on this podcast have we talked about our depth. That's why we're good. Our depth and athleticism. Well, we're not using both of those as efficiently as we should. Can we get back to being a deep team with many weapons where you can't focus on one person? And that is a huge challenge for these players and the coaches. But Bruce always says it, like, that's when we're at our best. We're playing 10 guys. Like, we need guys to contribute scoring. A lot of times people talk about, like, over focus on scoring. No, this team needs extra scoring options. That's what we need out of everything we could talk about. So it's kind of weird. I'm always big on, like, we focus too much on scoring. No, this year's team, it is almost directly like, can we get all of our players confidently able to score, or most of our players? Can we get there by this week? I don't know.
I think when, if you're looking at, like, I was talking about nightmare scenarios, you talk about the other way scenarios, dream scenarios, you can have a game like Jacksonville State where they are an inferior opponent. We talk about NCAA, like all teams of the tournament are good, but maybe not compared to going to at Tennessee, at Arkansas, at Florida, at Mississippi State, Texas A&M when they're hot like that. So you might get this Jacksonville State game, and all of a sudden things free up a little bit. The things that you've been wanting to do, this Wendell guy that has been frustrated with these big guards and people come up, all of a sudden he's faster than everybody. He's actually about the same size as some of these guys. And all of a sudden things get freed up a little bit, and you start hitting things, and you get to this next game. It's Miami or USC, and maybe they aren't. I don't think those guys are as good as some of the teams we just got done playing. So all of a sudden that opens up, oh, well, that's actually a better team, and we're hitting our shots now. Man, I'm driving right past that guy. I mean, that lob's still there from Walker. Remember when that was there? It's there all of a sudden. And all of a sudden you're in game 3. You pull off that USC Miami, you're in game 3, and we got depth. A lot of these teams shrink their rosters, and Bruce refuses to. We still going to play 8, 9, 10 guys. All of a sudden the depth's getting there a little bit. Maybe, Wisconsin and Iowa State, LSU, whoever's there is a little tired. They haven't played, and we gut out a hard one on that one. All of a sudden, our confidence is back. Our depth is looking good. Oh, man, Zep actually went off in that game and had like 15 points, and he hit a bunch of threes. And, oh, man, this team is having fun again. Yep. And it just, it changed. And then all of a sudden, you can't just leave. You can't go too hard on Jabari because these other guys are actually having a good time out there. And all of a sudden, Jabari's open up. No, he goes off for, that's my, like, little snowball of, like, how it could go completely the other direction.
And it can happen. I mean, it's so fun. The guys get to move themselves ahead on the bracket if they win. And the underrated thing, Calipari said this in the SEC tournament, the depth and the buys don't help you the first game. They help you the third game. Like today, Tennessee looked like the much fresher team than A&M because they were playing the third game, not the fourth game.
And, the same kind of concept. A couple times too, right? The hardest one to win is the first.
And you saw that Auburn team that went to the Final Four should have lost to New Mexico State because they had just finished 4 games in 4 days. They fly across the country. They have to play a team that hadn't lost in like 2.5 months, and they nearly pulled it off. And after that, Auburn settled in and played okay. If you're looking for an advantage, USC and Miami have to worry about each other just to get a chance at a potential matchup with Auburn in the second round. And they're going to do their scouting on Auburn, and they'll have their plan ready. But I'm just saying it's going to be hard for teams to match up against this Auburn team the second game in a 36, 48-hour span, because the players are focused on the first game. They have to get past the first game, and then they get a week to prepare for that first one. They get, less than 2 days to prepare for the second.
Well, we talked about a bunch of SEC. We've kind of gone down the thing, MVP, NCAA, SEC tournament. the game. We've even kept going deeper into like the troubles with this team and what we see going. So we have a little more to talk about. We have Horace still coming up. So if you're like, I'm hoping this one's going to go longer a little bit, and I'm cool with that because this is the big SEC NCAA show. You have a full week now. We took off a couple of days there. We could have done more shows. We got a full week or so. So feel free to stop and come back if you need to. But we're moving on, and we're talking about the coaching carousel, which has been really wild so far. I think we have who's all gotten fired? Tom Crean at Georgia, the guy at Missouri,
Cuonzo Martin at Missouri. Yeah,
Cuonzo Martin at Missouri. There was at least one more guy that got fired, right? Oh, Will Wade. How am I saying one more guy? Will Wade. We'll get a little more into that. Finally, the Dragon has been slayed over at LSU. And honestly, I think that's LSU committing, like surrendering, because it was going to come down to this. We were all worried about LSU and Will Wade, that it was either going to be Will Wade's going to keep being that coach, and the NCAA is going to die as a concept. These conferences are going to get together and say, screw the NCAA, we're doing our own thing now. Or it's going to be opposite. And the NCAA finally got its cojones back and decided to do something. And there's still some trouble out there. They might have found Will Wade, and they might still sue the NCAA and do some crazy stuff. Will Wade might do it. Like what he's doing now is legal anyways, pretty much, to bribe these players to come. Supposedly in another sport, Tennessee paid $8 million for one of their guys. So like, it's the Wild West out there, and it's not healthy for college sports, in my opinion. But Will Wade's gone, thank God. So that's at least 3 guys. So this is like Game of Thrones level here. So Will Wade, like we knew those first 2 were going to go. Tom Crean and Missouri, pretty much we're going to go. Then out of nowhere, Will Wade, pow, got by the NCAA. And you want to know, like, freaking Gravedigger coming out from wrestling, some music comes on. Freaking Georgia stole Mike White from Florida. Florida would have fired him. But the idea that Mike White is like done a switcheroo to Georgia is also just wild. And now the Florida position's open. So it's like wild out there. It's Game of Thrones. It's like WWE. It's wild.
And it's all happening now, which I guess this is the normal time. It just feels like it's all while this tournament and the SEC, the conference tournaments are still going on. But great to see Will Wade go. LSU fired him with cause based on the allegations they got. There were 8 level 1 violations on basketball and another sport got sprinkled in there as well.
Like 7 of the 8 were basketball.
Yeah. So
I mean, pretty intense on basketball. So
pretty significant if the NCAA has any like ability to do anything, which I don't think anybody knows at this point. But it's good to see that 5 years later, we're finally getting some validation there. Hopefully, this really cripples LSU for how they've processed it versus us. I know you hated how we handled it, and I
will be very irritated if we end up at the end, if they give them a postseason ban and take 2 scholarships over 4 years and like 1 or 2 little other things. And then people online will be like, oh, I can't believe they did that. They're punishing the kids that are there now, blah, 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 blah. And then we look at ours like, we did that too. And we actually like did all the right things and sat our players and didn't pay our players freaking $250,000 to come to our team. So I'll be pissed if it's the exact same.
But we got to keep our coach, which I think was the most valuable piece of our whole thing.
True. Or it depends on who LSU hires next. But hopefully, if they do announce, I guess LSU is hopefully pinning this on the NCAA coming out quickly and giving them their punishment, because if they don't, that could cripple them even more. Yes. If the NCAA refuses to give them their like
penalties, we have no penalties yet. They have not given any or suggested any penalties. Yeah.
So if they refuse for several months and they either can't hire a coach because they're waiting for those penalties to come down, and that's going to screw them up a lot, or B, they try to hire a coach before the penalties or even if the penalties come down and it's a postseason ban, a couple of things, it's going to hamper what kind of coach they can get. We're all worried. I mean, after seeing how the SEC has gone out and hired a bunch of like really like successful coaches from different places, it's good that LSU, even with whatever money they want to spend or whatever, might not be able to get that guy that maybe some other people like they would have gotten before,
Well, personally, we haven't talked about this. I'm thrilled that Georgia gets Mike White. I mean, there is nothing about Mike White at Florida that inspires confidence, recruiting. He was okay, but Florida fans would tell you it was just this den of mediocrity for pretty much his whole time there. And of all, I think you and I both worried about Georgia making this major like big splash hire, just throw money. I mean, it's cool to take Florida's coach, but honestly, given all the possibilities, I'm pretty happy that that's who they end up getting.
I was going to say before they hired Mike White that no matter who they hire, they're going to have this like little bump of like hype from whoever they hire. And they're probably going to get a guy like JD Davidson that went to Alabama, but the Georgia equivalent, the kind of kid that just cannot seem to get out of the state and has some uncles and whatever. They're going to be like disowning him if they don't go to Georgia or whatever. We just don't get that benefit. LSU gets that benefit. Alabama does, Georgia does. These state schools that like have this insane, like can get certain kids that will never leave their state or whatever. Mike White is actually a guy that might not be able to keep that guy. That's one of the few people that wouldn't, because they could have hired just a mid-major guy and would have brought at least that level of hype. Mike White might be able to do something. We were most worried that they would hire either one, like a successful coach throwing money at them from somewhere else, or two, just a guy that would end up like a kind of guy like Penny Hardaway at Memphis, right? That's his name, Penny Hardaway, or Juwan Howard at Michigan, or somebody else. It's just like, we don't know if this guy's actually a good coach, but he's gonna steal a bunch of recruits because he's got that swag, I mean, these are all former players like Deion Sanders over there in a different sport. Like some of these guys that just kind of come in and you have no idea if they're any good, but they're gonna be annoying as all get out for 3 or 4 years while they steal recruits from you and get people excited in Atlanta to go to Georgia when they should be going to Auburn. So you're right. I'm cool with Mike White. They might do something weird and we eat our words, but I doubt it.
They'll probably be better. But I mean, you worry about Georgia just making this stranglehold or prove, and even if they do that, it's going to take a long time to build that program up from where it was. It's probably like an Auburn type rebuild, maybe not quite that bad. So
like I said, they could turn that switch in a second with like some sort of great recruiter type or whatever, just by going and grabbing it. And in basketball, man, all it takes is a year. You go get a 5-star too that jumps on, and you go take a couple transfers, and all of a sudden you're screwed.
Yeah, but we'll see. Like I said, I'll take my chances with that. That was a big thing for us. If you're not paying attention, like we obviously have used Georgia to our advantage to build this program, and I was nervous, and like you said, maybe we look back 2 years from now and we're like, wow, we were stupid. But it just doesn't feel like the move that's going to like kick Bruce out of Georgia, Yeah.
In the days of the transfer portal, all these firings, you're like looking around to see, like, we know we need a power forward and a center. We definitely need a center. So I wonder if any of these teams that just lost a coach have a great center. I guess Florida, Castleton's a senior, isn't he? I think. So Missouri, I don't remember one. Georgia, I don't remember one. LSU, they have Darius Days. Is he a center?
Seems like he's been there forever.
He shoots a lot of threes. I don't know. Anyways, I don't know if we have some players we can pick off.
LSU has a 5-star power forward for this year's class that everybody's asking if he can get out of his.
I'm sure he can. There seems to be no rules. So, we'll look into that. Florida, we'll have to see if they hire, they have some real history with Billy Donovan winning 2 national championships, and kind of like almost a shame a little bit. We look at what Bruce Pearl's doing at Auburn, and we hope we can be a Duke, we can be a Gonzaga, we can be a Villanova, some of these that hire that great coach and become like close to blue blood level and feel like they've cemented like this greatness. Florida, I'm sure their fans thought after winning 2 national champions with Billy Donovan, they had cemented this like basketball culture at their school. And it really feels like there's been a big drop off, and no one, like, from a national perspective, even though they've still made lots of tournaments and done things, there's just not still that same, like, these guys are a hidden giant or anything like that, which they can be. You hire the right guy and the thing changes altogether.
This feels like they've been perpetually on the bubble. They've made the tournament, but it's been as a 9 seed or an 8 seed or an 11 seed or whatever. Haven't made it.
Show something about where their program's at, that they'll fire a guy, or we're going to probably fire a guy that makes the tournament consistently. He just does it in a very low seed in a frustrating way.
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, maybe they wanted to keep him and Georgia just came and stole him, but it just seems like an odd coach to steal.
Yeah, I think he knew the writing was on the wall, that at the very least, even if he got another year, it was like the fans were going to absolutely rebel. We've seen in other sports, that kind of coach that just stays mediocre, right? Everybody else is getting better around them. And it just becomes like a thing eventually where the fans almost hate that guy more than a guy that just completely fails, because at least the guy that completely fails, you can move on from. So that's kind of the coaching carousel. I don't know if we'll see, you just hope Florida and LSU don't hire somebody. LSU, I don't think will be able to pull it off. Missouri, they came into the conference supposed to be a basketball team. You know, like there was like the argument about bringing Missouri in, other than like clearly a money grab for like the state of Missouri, but they were supposed to bring basketball with them and they did not at all. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, they made like 2 of 5 seasons made the tournament or something like that for Kwanzaa. He's had a weird career. He got Tennessee to a Sweet 16 or two when he was at Tennessee. They had some success, and then I forget what even happened to cause him to go. But anyway,
there's a chance Frank Martin's out at South Carolina too. They haven't pulled that trigger yet, but Frank Martin gave like kind of a sad, emotional speech about how he wants to keep coaching the team and keep coaching these kids, and he's just going to let it go how it goes, which is not the kind of stuff that you usually hear from a coach. But, you know, it's easy for us on outsiders to be like, just be happy with your guy. He took you to the Final Four and he plays hard basketball. No one seems to have any issues with him. But like, it's easy from an outsider to be like, just be cool being mediocre for years and years.
And they're not making the tournament. You know, that's the thing. College basketball is a wasteland when you don't get in the big dance. It's just, and we've felt it for over a decade there. And you know, and honestly, I think for South Carolina, for Missouri, seeing everybody in the SEC raise their game, right? Seeing what Buzz Williams is a terrific coach. And you got to see a reminder of it this week. And he's at A&M, and A&M's like a 8th, 9th, 10th team in the league. Like it's insane how much better the games are, the coaches are, the programs are. And if you're one of those teams on the lower half, you have to be looking at Auburn and, like even what LSU's done, even though it's been kind of sketchy, and all these teams, everybody's been kind of competitive, like semi lately. Or it seems like a lot of people have. So I'm sure there's a lot of fire to try to get there if you're not there right now.
You know, this one's going a little long, so it's just we're tacking horse on here at the end. But we don't know how many more shows we have like this left. Me and Matt have been a little like tired at times. How many we've done doing them after every game or whatever. But now at the end, I'm getting a little like, oh no, we don't know. But so two things left, that I just come up with or whatever. One, check out this cool plaque. I had this in my parents' house in the closet for a long time. It's Auburn University basketball court signed by Bruce Pearl. And I went to when his plane arrived. I went to greet him at the airport. And when he did I went to the press conference. And when he did this like student section practice, back when he'd have to convince people to come learn how to be basketball fans in the student section, he waited and shook every hand of every student that went in there. And I had this plaque on my wall. Like, how rare is it to have Auburn basketball memorabilia in the mid 2010s during the Tony Barbie era? Like, who even made this? It was clearly made in like the 80s, but I have it. I finally got it out of my parents' closet. So that's a cool little piece of memorabilia. And the other thing I was going to get you to do, Matt, and me both, is just to look at these matchups real quick and maybe call out, maybe for some of these fans that are tuning in that have just been following Auburn or like don't know the national stuff as well. Like, I mean, we're not some great national experts, but like I wanted to point out one in particular, this Wright State Bryant, the 16 seed. You think, 16 seed play, I'm not going to watch that. Or Bryant has this guy named Peter Kiss. I watched their win their championship game. It was wild. This guy Peter Kiss is he scores the most points in all of college basketball. Even at that level, it's wild. And he is a straight villain. Dude is like sticking his tongue out. He's like making shots and then doing push-ups after. He's wearing like a Kiss rock band t-shirt to warm up in. He's like the most hateable guy, but also you respect it because he's dropping like 30 a night, and that's like insane in college basketball. So like if you're getting that like first little taste of NCAA March Madness, tune into that Bryant Wright State matchup because you just got to check them out.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes the tournament so great, right? Is you get to zoom out and if you really get to watch these games. You remember who's that? Asmus. There was a kid last year who took his Old Dominion, or was it not Old Dominion? Oral Roberts. They went to the Elite Eight, and it was just this amazing story. He was the top scorer in Division I last year.
Really, yeah.
So obviously 16 seeds not going to probably do that, but
it'll be a fun one though. A little taste, right at the beginning, Wednesday night or that Tuesday or whenever they play. It'll be fun to see that.
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, you got the first four, which I kind of hate in principle, but I think just looking over at the brackets as a whole, it really just feels like this year is completely wide open. I mean, every year we say that, I feel like, but Gonzaga's unproven. They have 3 losses. Arizona, looks really good, but the Pac-12 only got, I believe, 3 or 4 teams in. They were kind of a weak league. Kansas looks great. Baylor looks great, but they have 6 losses each. They're not head and shoulders above everybody else.
They said last year they were like, oh, it was everyone knew Gonzaga and Baylor were just so dominant. Like, I think that's a little revisionist history because they ended up dominating. I mean, how many other years did, like, if Duke with Zion and RJ and all that had just completely dominated the tournament, everyone would just said, like, of course they dominated the tournament. Well, they didn't, So I think there's some like revisionist history on some of that stuff, but Gonzaga will be interesting to watch it. Like, they just haven't played anybody real in so long, but they keep doing this in these tournaments. And honestly, like, I disliked them this year because they were always competing with us for 1 seeds and number ones. But like, honestly, like overall, I think it's a cool concept that a small school like Gonzaga can pull it off. And, they're also feel like they are on a sword, like an edge link, that if they go out in the second round this year, like the narrative of their like blue blood status is going to be completely cut off. So that's interesting to watch. I saw that UAB made the tournament, and I wonder what Jamal Johnson was doing. And I got the name right from last year's team that played, hit some threes. I looked at the stats for that game that they won the championship, but he wasn't even on there. Is he hurt? Is he gone? Have you heard anything about that?
I have no idea. I do know that Justin Powell did not play at all today.
Wow, he's complete. Oh, he must have something going on. I wonder if he'll transfer again. I mean, didn't he have like 6 or 7 schools in a row or something like that already? So I could see him transferring. It's a super shame. I was a big fan while he was playing. We'd not had a player like him in a long time, like that sharpshooter type. We could have really used a 3-position sharpshooter type on this team, man.
Just frustrating. You imagine he would be, of course, we probably wouldn't have had one of the transfers, but, he is kind of what this team needs right now. And that's frustrating. I try not to even think about that.
Both him and, we say the what ifs, both him and JD Davis, maybe we have too much confidence in Bruce or whatever, but he wanted both those players. And I just feel like Bruce would have them in a better place than they are at their own schools. So
Davison, man, he's so athletic, but there was some plays in that Vanderbilt game that they lost where he just like wasn't even paying attention. Like somebody passed it to him on the wing and it just hit him in the shoulder and went out of bounds. Like it just.
I hope he pulls a Shreve Cooper or some of these other players that like they got some hype and they'll get a late second round pick out of their like athletic ability and measurables, and they leave college way too early. Like, I want him out, but like I know like he's been so bad, but I also want him out just in case he does figure it out next year.
Well, I do feel like if you just look at this bracket as a whole, I really would you be shocked if Iowa was so impressive. I watched them. They have some veteran guards who can shoot the lights out of the ball. Iowa's like the 17th team technically ranked in this bracket. It just wouldn't shock me if Illinois won as a 4 seed.
I hope not. Their fans are so obnoxious about Bruce. I just don't want them to do anything well.
I just think any of the top 4 seeds in any region, and maybe throw in Iowa and maybe 1 or 2 other teams, like it wouldn't shock me at all if one of the any of those 17 teams got to the end. And it's so hard to win 6 games in this tournament that I just want to encourage everybody to, man, when you advance, you just need to really, even if you're a 2 seed, we've seen 15s win, we've seen a 16 win, like you need to enjoy it.
Do you think people would be interested in doing the Jungle podcast March Madness bracket thing? Do you think we'd have enough people to do that?
I have no idea.
Throw it out there and just see people vote on it.
Let's throw it out there. If you've hung with us for this long in the podcast,
I'll throw it out there on Twitter. If we can, or Twitter and Instagram, if we can get like more than 10 people or something, we'll do it. I see that Loyola Chicago Ohio State matchup. That'll be interesting. Ohio State's had a really up and down season, and Loyola Chicago has been, as we've seen, had these great runs. I would love for Loyola Chicago with their first year head coach after we beat them this year to go on a little run there. That'd be fun. Another couple wins for Sister Jean,
Yeah, no doubt.
And if you see any other interesting matchups on here, what about some 5-12s? Who's our 5-12s on here?
So we've got Houston and UAB. Houston's really been struggling. That'll be an interesting game. New Mexico.
Some players, right? They got hurt, I believe.
Houston, yeah, yep.
Yeah, that'll be a fun matchup to watch.
Hey, for you,
a home state team that we, that I feel like missed a golden opportunity to beat the basketball power of our state if they'd really embraced it the way they could have 10 years ago.
I was just going to say 4 teams from Alabama in the NCAA tournament with Jacksonville State getting in. Like, that's pretty wild. Houston, you hate metrics, right? Houston is 3rd in the net, and they got a 5 seed. So there you go.
What about who we got over there? UConn and New Mexico State as a
New
5-12.
Mexico State, man, we saw it a few years ago. Very dangerous program that they know a lot about winning. They go through that league. I think they feel like they've been in most of the tournaments in recent memory.
we're, we're bringing up 5-12 because that's like kind of been an infamous
Yep.
matchup for upsets. That there always seems to be a 12 that makes that upset, while there's not always the other seeds that make it upset. This other one's going to be super fun too. 5-12 St. Mary's versus either Wyoming or Indiana with a play-in, and those play-ins, like we've talked about, can get hot. And Wyoming has had kind of a wild season too, where people were going to be really upset if Wyoming didn't make the tournament. I don't know if it's because if they were in at large or what the deal was, but they were very happy. They were like the last team in, and I think they could be one of those like smaller teams that goes nuts.
Yeah, no doubt. South Dakota State's one of those teams.
Are they 5-12 also?
They're a 13. They are a dangerous. I think they have Providence. Yeah. So
who's the other 5-12? There's one more, right, on the other side.
Oh, I think Iowa, Richmond. Richmond upset Davidson to win the A10, and they got in as a 12. I kind of like Iowa there, but it's always a blast. I'm really excited about potential second round matchups. Like we could have Baylor, North Carolina in the second round. Could have you mentioned the Murray State, Kentucky potential.
Ooh, man, I'm excited for that one. I hope that happens.
Providence, Iowa, if they can avoid upsets in the second round, would be an awesome game.
Auburn, USC, and my girlfriend is a USC alum, and we have to clash very often in sports. And I've gotten onto significant others of people at the St. Pat's NYC bar when they bring, like, it'll be a big time game and they'll bring us together and they're like cheering and stuff. And I'm like, for one game, you can go to separate places or maybe just watch in your house. Like, don't bring the LSU fan to the bar. Bring and if Amanda listens, like, you can bring your husband. Like, anyways, other people, like, so we'll see if she said she'll wear an Auburn shirt, maybe USC socks or something, but it'll be a little house rivalry there,
I got to be honest. I think I'm rooting for Miami there. USC has their big guy last year went to the Cavaliers. He's having a great rookie
Mobley,
year.
right? Emma Mobley.
Yeah, his brother is another not quite as big guy, but really good player for them. I really thought USC might be a 5 or a 6 seed. So that's, to me, I'd be rooting for Miami.
We're funny. I've gone back and forth on doing brackets sometimes, because sometimes it's more fun to watch the whole thing without a bracket, because then you can just cheer for the upsets the entire time, and you don't have to worry about, like, well, no, I picked that guy to go. Like, you don't really care about Iowa, but you pick them to go to Elite Eight. And so all of a sudden, when Richmond's like got them on the ropes, you're like cheering for Iowa. It's just not as fun. So I've like gone back and forth on that. But the matchups that are fun with that, if you pick one, is where you look up and all of a sudden you have Iowa State in the Sweet 16 or LSU in the Sweet 16, and you really don't care who's going to win that Iowa State LSU game. But then you're like, since you have the bracket, all of a sudden you have a little fun matchup. It's like, that's kind of a little math you have to do with these brackets,
I feel like I've found a good balance. My brackets always stink. I do usually beat the high schooler that I compete against. Family I used to work with.
Shout out. You want to give them a shout out on the pod?
Well, I did have to reveal that I do a podcast tonight to get out of there. I was hanging out with their family. So the Teals, shout out. Thank you for the dinner tonight. It was fantastic. We always fill out our brackets together. We've been doing this since he was in like elementary school. I've beaten him every year. So hopefully I can continue that. But in general, my brackets stink. And I still cheer for all the upsets, even if it's going to ruin my bracket, just because I think that's what's fun. Now, here's the interesting thing to maybe wrap it up as an Auburn fan. I think what the wrath that we experienced on Friday of losing that game in an ugly fashion, it was a really almost direct response to having expectations. Like, this is the second highest seed Auburn has ever had in an NCAA tournament. We are going to feel things as fans that are going to be entirely different than what we experienced 3 years ago when we were the lovable underdog going up against these blue bloods. Like, this is going to be a just pressure cooker every game Auburn plays in this tournament, because until, the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, and even maybe after that, they're going to be kind of expected to win, at least on paper, by the seed. So I'm nervous about that, because I don't want people to get lost in like this is still a historical season that we need to kind of enjoy, but it's hard when we see the potential of this team and it just doesn't feel like they're quite there, they're quite living up to it.
And we know what historical underdogs we are, but
Yep.
as the 2 seed, most neutrals are not going to understand that concept really, and they want their other friends brackets to be busted and all these other things. And even during that Final Four round, like we were 5 seed, we end up going through these blue bloods or whatever, and we had the like world on our side a little bit.
Yep.
People were out, like, you go to a bar anywhere, whatever, they were cheering for Auburn because it was against some blue blood or whatever. It's going to be weird to be the bad guys a little bit and be like, it offends you almost a little bit because you're like, but no, like we're so historically bad, let us have this or whatever. They're not going to understand it, and I'm not going to know how to process it. So it's going to be weird.
Well, and we have so much pressure to live up to that. We've had this great season. We've won this championship. We have these players that we know we're only going to have for this limited amount of time. Like, you've been so on that all year, and you're right. Like, this is where we need to maximize their efficiency while they're wearing orange and blue. And I feel like it's just a lot of pressure given where the team is right now to try to survive and advance. Like, that's all that matters at this point. But it's going to be, I'm really going to try to not, I'm going to be, well, here's what I think. I'm going to be more stressed during this tournament than probably any time in my Auburn basketball watching life. I really feel like I'm going to feel the intensity, the pressure of an early exit with this team would just be really sad. I think I'm going to really be very anxious on Friday and Sunday.
I mean, they've only done it 3 times now, and those first games have been brutal each time or whatever. But oof, like, you take off, I'm gonna try to take off a half day probably and go watch it at the bar. And it's like the idea that this team's good enough that I want to take off a half day from work that's important to me that I have to save up for other reasons, So it's a big deal. This show's been kind of long, but we wanted to talk to everybody about the NCAA stuff. I hope you all enjoyed it. Horace Spencer's coming up next. It was from earlier today. Enjoy that. Hopefully you stuck around this whole time. We'll throw something about brackets maybe, and if enough people want to do it, we'll set something up. So Matt, any final thoughts or anything?
Oh man, let's get back to Peacock energy. Let's survive and advance, and hopefully, are we planning to do, we haven't talked about this, we're doing this live, are we going to try to do a Friday night, first round game recap, and then are we trying to go after it?
Because I'm going to put together maybe a reel or something, but me and my good friend Ryan a couple years back did this insane March Madness bar crawl where in New York there's a alumni bar for every school basically, and we made this whole list and made these jerseys with whiteboards on it where we could change the logos and stuff, and we literally jogged and ran, took taxis to all these different bars all over New York City to watch these different games and celebrate with these different teams or whatever. So we might try to do that. So then it would be tough to do
Saturday morning, maybe Saturday
morning maybe. We'll see if I can even wrestle the friends together to do that kind of bar crawl again. Yeah. I think I'm going to buy some headsets, so maybe I could do the postseason from St. Pat's, which would be fun. But also, I don't want to keep up my laptop the whole time. So we'll see if we'll see. I think at the very least, you're right. We'll get it up like midway Saturday, so we at least have a podcast before the next game.
Yeah. I would just say, everybody, this is what we build towards. We've talked about how you shouldn't only focus on March. You should enjoy the regular season and chasing a title. We got a title. We really disappointed in the SEC tournament, but now the great part about college basketball is if we can flush that loss, you can still have a run that gives people a lot of fun and a lot of excitement over the next few weeks, starting on Friday. So hopefully we can get back to playing the style of ball that got us this good seed in the first place.
And here comes Horace Spencer.
Let's go. War Eagle, everybody.